2 Corinthians chapter 9 has got three main divisions. The first main division is prepare. Second main division is purpose. And then we will see, of course, the example of our own provider who gives to us. And you can all guess who that is. But let's jump into the first section, verses 1 to 5, which is the section on prepare. Now, again, Paul is, this is the tail end of a section that Paul was teaching the Corinthians on, writing to them about their giving. The giving was specifically for Christians in Jerusalem, Christians who were suffering in Jerusalem, and the Corinthians had the opportunity to give their money. Paul was taking up a collection, sending it with some people. We read about those people last week, and the Corinthians had an opportunity to give. And so he's been encouraging them in that and challenging them in that. And tonight what we'll see is that he gives them some instructions, and we learn some valuable instructions. Now, all of that, and let me say this. I know that there are a lot of you in here that do not have your own money, meaning you're not working, you're not making your own money. You're using mom and dad's money. You may have, maybe some of you have a job, or you've got a babysitting job, or you've got whatever, and you're actually making some money. Maybe you make jewelry or whatever, and you've got a little bit of money. Well, then there are some instructions in here for you in the use of that money. Now, if you do not have money, don't worry. One of these days, you will. Okay? You will have money of your own. You'll get a job. You'll be working. You'll have money. And it's good to know how we're to use that. How should we handle that money? Okay? But in the meantime, if for right now you do not have money, that's okay. This chapter still applies, because what you want to do is you want to take a look at what you do have. What resources do you have? If you do not have money to give, your own money to give, what do you have? Obviously, the T word, right? The one that Pastor Chris talks about all of the time, and that is our time. What are we doing with our time? These biblical principles will apply to whatever resources we have to give. So don't feel like, oh, I don't have any money. Forget it. This chapter is not for me. It certainly is. There are people that collect, they trap and collect animals for zoos in Africa. And there are some of the hardest animals to catch are the ring-tailed monkey. For the Zulus of that continent, some of you have heard of Zulus, however, it's simple. They've been catching this agile little animal with ease forever. The method the Zulus use is based on knowledge of the animal itself, the ring-tailed monkey. Their trap is nothing more than a melon growing on a vine. The seeds of this melon are a favorite of the monkey. Knowing this, the Zulus simply cut a small hole in the melon, just large enough for the monkey to squeeze his hand in to reach the seeds inside. The monkey will squeeze his hand in, grab as many seeds as he can, then start to withdraw his hand from the melon, which he cannot do. His fist is now larger than the hole. The monkey will pull and tug, screech and fight the melon for hours, but he can't get free of the trap unless he gives up the seeds, which the monkey refuses to do. The trappers then simply walk up, grab a hold of the monkey that cannot get away. Some people are like that with their resources. What they have, they're holding on to so tight that it's actually becoming dangerous for them. We might even say that it's becoming life-threatening for them. People that hold on to their resources so tight. And so Paul is giving us some examples here, wonderful examples of being able to give freely. Let's look at it, verse 1. Now, concerning the ministering to the saints. The ministering to the saints means concerning giving the money to the saints. That word ministering in this sense means that, okay, concerning giving the money to the saints. It is superfluous. What a cool word. It means unnecessary. But superfluous sounds way better. Okay? Superfluous for me to write to you. So it's not necessary for me to write to you. For I know your willingness, in verse 2, about which I boast of you to the Macedonians. Now, right here under prepare, and we'll talk about the prepare in just a minute. But under prepare, what Paul does is he says the Corinthians, he's been using them as an example to the Macedonians. He says, I boast about you to the Macedonians that Achaia, referring to the Corinthians, the churches that were in that area, was ready a year ago. And then he says to them, your zeal has stirred up the majority. Yet I have sent the brethren, the brothers, lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this respect, that as I said, you may be ready. Now, we'll talk about what that means in verse 3 in just a moment. He sent some people ahead of him to collect money. We'll talk about why. But verse 2 was, as I was studying through this, verse 2 really did remind me of you guys, of the high school group that we have here. In this sense, look what he says. For I know your willingness, about which I boast of you to the Macedonians. And I think I shared this with you recently, I brag about you guys all the time. All the time. It may seem funny to you at first, but here's one example, one recent example. We just had potluck and communion, right? Now, we did not put a sign-up sheet with, okay, bring this, bring this, bring this, bring this. And I was telling somebody, somebody was asking me, well, did you make a sign-up sheet with like specific things to bring? I said, no. What I did was I told the students the week before, I said, listen, we don't have a list. I just want you to think about your family here and then bring something that's going to bless them. And the next week for the potluck, you guys and ladies showed up with an incredible amount of food. There was too much food here. And it wasn't just all chips or all veggie straws. Where's O'Neill with his veggie straws? Love those veggie straws. But it wasn't just like, oh, I just brought my leftover peanuts from the house or something. You guys hooked it up. And so afterwards, being able to tell people, no, look, you don't understand, we had too much food. These guys brought food, and they brought plenty of food for everybody because they love one another. And that is the same thought is what Paul is saying here. He says, I'm boasting, I'm bragging about you guys to the Macedonians. Your zeal at the end of verse 2 has stirred up the majority. When all of you are here, and we got a potluck coming up again at the first Wednesday night of December for our Christmas party. It's that time of year already. But when you're talking about, oh yeah, I'm going to bring this, I'm going to bring that, it's stirring other people up. Well, oh, you're going to bring, okay, I'm going to bring this, or I'm going to make this, or I'm going to bring this thing. And everybody is encouraged. It's funny to me, whenever we have a potluck, all of a sudden we have a lot of extra guests after service. And it's funny for me to be in here, we got potluck, we got food, service is over, we're hanging out, we're talking, and then all of a sudden I notice like somebody's dad is in here. It's like, who's that? Oh, it's so-and-so's dad. And he's getting down, man. He's like, oh, yeah, I'm looking for my son. I'm looking for my daughter. Like, okay, yeah, I can't find him. I'll just sit over here for a minute and wait for him. Like, getting down, like, just filling it up. It's like, did you have dinner already before you came? Nothing wrong with second dinners, right? But you see them, and, little brothers and little sisters come in, man, and they're eating. Everybody's eating because you guys bring enough so that it's overflowing and everybody is getting blessed. We want to keep that attitude up. I commend you guys. Thank you so much for doing that, for thinking about your family that way and wanting to bless them when we have those types of events going on. Now, Paul is talking about the subject of money here, but really it's bigger than money. It's giving whatever it is that I have. But at the beginning here, Paul says, listen, I use you guys as an example. I brag about you guys to the Macedonians. And your zeal, your excitement is stirring up everybody else. He says in verse 3, yet I have sent the brethren, that's brothers. I've sent the brothers, lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this respect. This is funny because Paul says, man, I've been bragging about you guys. But just in case, I sent some guys ahead to start collecting or to remind you. because he's going to tell us why in just a minute. So it's funny. No, man, I'm bragging about you guys. But just in case you forget, I sent some people to remind you before we get there. Okay? Now, the reason he sent some people in verses 4 and 5 was so that embarrassment could be avoided. Okay? Now remember, they're getting ready to collect money and transport that to Jerusalem. And so in verse 4, Paul writes, lest, okay, so I'm sending people ahead of time so that you can be ready. There's the prepared part. Got to be prepared. Lest, so that if some Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to mention you, should be ashamed of this confidence or this confident boasting. In other words, I've sent some people ahead of you, and we're on our way. But I don't want to show up with some of the Macedonians, because I've been bragging about you, show up with some of the Macedonians, and then we get there and you're looking at us like, what? We're not giving money. What are you talking about? Paul says we want to avoid that kind of embarrassment. He says, I would be embarrassed. You guys would be embarrassed. Okay, let's bring it into context. I brag about you guys, like the potlucks or whatever we have going on. When we call and we say, hey, here's what we got going on, and, participate, you guys come out and you participate. And you give. It would be like me saying, yeah, we're going to have a potluck. And I'm telling, maybe, some other youth group or some other youth pastor about it. No, you got to check out this potluck, man. We do potlucks. And then he says, okay, I'm coming to the next one. And then we get that youth pastor to come. And there's like, just nothing here. A few bags of chips, half bottle of water or something. And we'd be like, oh, well, normally they're pretty good. I don't know. We'd be embarrassed. So Paul says, I sent people ahead of us to remind you guys so that you can be prepared, so that there's nobody embarrassed. Verse 5, therefore, I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren, challenge them to go to you ahead of time and prepare, there's the prepared part, your generous gift beforehand, which you had previously promised, that it may be ready as a matter of generosity and not as a grudging obligation. Oh, you guys are here to collect. All right, fine. And I guess, you're here. You brought the Macedonians. I guess I have to give now. Instead of that kind of an attitude, he sends the messengers ahead of time so that they can be prepared. Now, this is a great, great point. Great point. Because whenever we're giving, we ought to be ready to give. When it's in the context of giving at church, let's just talk for a moment about tithes and or offerings. I think everybody's heard those phrases, right? Or those words, tithes or offerings. Okay, tithe means 10%, and some of our family, they like to give 10%. They get their paycheck and they figure out 10% and they give that to the church. Okay, that's good. That's a good thing. It's a good start. Tithes or offerings. Offerings would be the same thing, except it might not be just a tithe at 10%. Somebody might give 15% or 20%, or they might give less. So it's the same idea. It's giving. But when we're giving in the context of church, we should be prepared to do that. Instead of waiting till, the ushers are coming to the front. Now, we don't send around a bag and collect money in here, obviously. In case you didn't know, there is a box right next to the door, and you can put money in there if you'd like. But we're not sending anything around. But when you've got your money and you're ready to give at church, you should be ready to do that with a specific amount. In other words, what you don't want to do is just, here comes the bags again for the money. That's right. Let me see what I got. Let's see. Okay, I got like 50 cents. Hey, you got any money? You got 16 cents? Okay. Yeah, I'll just give 75 cents and some lint from my pocket. Yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah, here you go, Lord. Just put it in there. Instead, it should be something that I look forward to doing. Such a strange concept for the world. You look forward to giving things away? Yes. And Paul is telling them, look, you got to be prepared. Decide what it is that you want to do. And we're going to talk about deciding here in just a moment. But that's the idea, is let's be prepared. Now, I already told you, let's make it practical. We've got another potluck coming up. on the first Wednesday in December for our Christmas party. So what you want to do is you want to start thinking right now, like, okay, what can I bring? Because maybe, for the majority of you, you don't have money to give, but that's an opportunity for you to bring something, to offer something. And that kind of a neat idea that, man, like I can bring a pie, or I can bring some chicken, or I can bring some food item to offer to the Lord. And it becomes an offering as I'm offering it or giving it to my family right here. So the attitude of my heart is, you know what, I'm giving it freely, man. I'm making the best that I can for my church family. I love them. We want to be prepared to do those types of things. I was talking to, I've got to be careful because we have some young adults in here. But I was talking to one of the young adults the other day, and he was telling me about some of their events and how he's got to remind all the guys, hey, you're going to bring something, right? Oh yeah, I'm going to bring something. Okay, what are you going to? And then he'll ask them, what are you going to bring? Because we all know how guys can be, right? Oh, there's a potluck. That's right. Oh, stop at the A.M.P.M. Like, let's see. I'll take a package of Twinkies. That's how some of us guys are, right? Some of us are. We're not really focused or thinking about those things. But for the guys tonight, the girls too, the ladies, you want to be thinking ahead of time. Okay, I want to be prepared. I want to bring something that means something, man. Like I want to bless these people. Okay, so he's telling them, be prepared. He used them as an example and then told them you should be prepared. That way, embarrassment is avoided. And, you don't show up just empty-handed and like, whoa, I didn't bring anything, but since there's plenty of food, let me just, pack it all up here and take lunch for the next week, Now, he goes into the second main division, which is the purpose, and it's just verses 6 and 7. And this is not the purpose of giving, but this is rather giving with purpose, giving on purpose, giving purposely, purposefully, we might say. Verse 6, but this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Now, this is a great biblical principle that applies to lots of areas, not just giving money, but it applies to every opportunity or area of giving. Now, remember, I don't just give money. Time is extremely valuable. Something happened when I got saved at 20 years old. Up until that point, I had very few cares. I didn't care about anything, really, to be honest with you. And at 20 years old when I got saved, something clicked in my mind. And the reality that I got saved at 20, the reality that not only was I saved, but I had just wasted 20 years of my life. 20 years. You think about that. I mean, none of you are even 20 yet. Imagine you get to the age of 20 and then you realize I just wasted 20. You talk about wasting time, right? I mean, you might waste 20 minutes, you might waste 2 hours, you might waste 20 days. Think about wasting 20 years, and the reality of that set in. And God, the Spirit of God was doing something in my life. And all of a sudden I had this urgency about me where I needed to do things. But part of all of that realization was the realization that my heart, my human heart, I'm not talking about spiritual, I'm talking about the human heart, the organ in my chest, that it only has so many beats. And that at some point in my life, it's going to stop beating. It's going to stop beating. I don't know how many beats it has, but there are only God knows the number of the beats. And at some point, it's going to stop. My lungs, I inhale, I exhale. There are only so many, and I don't know the number, there are only so many breaths that I can inhale and exhale, and one of these days my heart's going to stop and my lungs are going to stop, and I am going to be no more. And I think that I believe that's going to happen sooner than any of us think. I think that when it happens, it's the thought is going to be, this came so fast. Life is moving quick. It's moving fast. And all of us, if the Lord, we know about the rapture. We'll talk about it some more when we get into Thessalonians and stuff. But if the rapture doesn't happen first, all of us are going to expire. All of us are going to expire. What we want to do here, there's a wonderful biblical principle is, he says, he who sows sparingly. Now he's borrowing this term from the planting or farming or gardening world. He who sows sparingly. Was sow, he's talking about seed. You would sow or plant seed. And he says, he who sows sparingly is going to reap sparingly. You plant just a few seeds, you're going to get just a few crops. And those of you that have tried to grow produce before, vegetables, you know that you can plant a lot of seeds, but all of those seeds are not going to grow. You're going to get some produce from those seeds. And Paul is saying if you do so, if you plant sparingly, in other words, you only do a little bit, you're only going to get a little bit back. He says, but he who sows bountifully, if you sow a bunch, then you're going to reap bountifully. Now, he borrows that gardening term or these phrases to talk about giving money. He's telling the Corinthians, if you only give a little bit of money, then you're only going to reap small benefits from that. But if you give a lot of money, you're going to reap more benefits. It's a biblical principle that applies to every area of our lives. When we are stingy with whatever we have, any of our resources, time, talent, treasure, when we're stingy with those things, you ought not expect much back from that. But when we're willing to give, and give bountifully, then you'll reap bountifully. Talk to your small group leader tonight. I don't know if you knew this or not, but as far as the leaders that are in here, I'm the only one being paid. I'm on staff here at the church. This is what I do. Every other adult leader in here is volunteer. They could be home tonight with a cup of hot chocolate, sitting in front of the fireplace, reading a good book, watching a Hallmark movie or Lifetime movie or something. Could be decorating their house. They could be in bed getting ready to sleep, whatever. They could be doing anything else, and they've chosen to surrender or give their time. They're giving their time here. And you talk to them and ask them if it's a blessing. Ask them if it's a blessing. Is it a blessing for you to be here with us? And watch what they say. They are giving much of their time, and they're receiving bountifully for it. As they are surrendering more of their time to serve you guys as they're serving the Lord, they're receiving benefits, huge benefits from that. It's the way it works. And so in verse 7, he says, so. He who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. He who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So in verse 7, I love this. So let each one give as he purposes. There it is. There's the purpose. As he purposes, as he decides in his heart, not grudgingly or out of necessity, not because it's just duty. I just have to. For God loves a cheerful giver. I'm actually telling you, Paul's actually telling you to give cheerfully. And actually the word can be translated hilariously. God loves a hilarious giver. Here you go. Here's my money. Take it. I'll give you more here. Or your time or whatever you have, your time, talent, your treasure, you give it and then you go, you know what? That's so much fun here. I'm going to give you more. And that's what happens. You start to serve, you start to give of your own resources, your own time, you get hooked. And you want more. What else can I do? And well, let's see. You can vacuum or do this thing. Okay, you go and you do it, and you come back like, okay, is there something else I can do? You're like looking. You're looking for more. That's what happens. That's how it works. Give cheerfully. If you are giving something of your, you're giving your time or your talent or your treasure, and you're doing it grudgingly, bad attitude, you don't really want to give it, don't give it. Do not give it. Do not give it. It's okay. I know how to vacuum. I used to be a janitor. I would never want to go back there and do that again, ever. Yeah, it's no fun at all. I know how to vacuum, take out trash, dust. I know how to do those things. If you want to do it, but you're doing it with a bad attitude, just don't do it. It'll get done. Don't worry about it. Do it, but do it cheerfully. Do it on purpose. Give and love doing it. Now, third and final section, we're going to see if we can just finish this whole chapter. It's been a while since Pastor Chris has been able to finish an entire chapter. Hopefully everybody understands so far, right? Everybody understanding so far? Yes? Easy. Easy money. Okay? No pun intended. Now, third main division is the provider. Now, as Paul's telling them to give, what he does now is he turns his attention toward the provider, the one that provides. Who is that? God. Okay? So he's going to give us the example of God. He's going to basically tell us, hey, give like God does. Oh, man. Verse 8. And God is able to make all grace abound toward you. I want you to notice the language he's using. All grace abound toward you. Not half grace. Not a portion, not a percentage. All grace abound toward you. That you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. You see, when God gives, he gives, here it is, he provides abundantly. Notice the language, all grace abound toward you, that you always, having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. Here's how it works. This is really cool. God gives so that you can give. God gives so that you can give. And you know what happens? You know what happens? The more you give, the more God gives. If you're a giving person, he just keeps providing you with things and you keep giving them away. It's a good thing. Most of the time somebody gives you a gift, you don't want to just give it away. It's something that they gave you. But in this case, God wants you to give away his resources. He gives to you, then you give. Has God given you money? Maybe some of you he has. There's some of you in here with jobs. But more than likely, what he's given you is time. He's given all of us time. He gives you time, you give it away. He gives you resources, talent, again, time, talent, treasure, whatever he gives you, you give it away, he gives you more. As it is written in verse 9, he quotes from Psalm 112 here. This is verse 9. Psalm 112, verse 9, in verse 9. As it is written, he, that's speaking about God, has dispersed abroad. He has given to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. So that's the way that God gives. Notice he disperses abroad. He's not stingy and just like, well, I'm just going to give to the people that are just right here. No, he disperses abroad. He's just given out resources everywhere. But he also has given to the poor. Great example. Should we give to the poor? Well, if God does, I think it's a great idea for us to do it. Giving to the poor. His righteousness, even this, his righteousness endures forever. Even his righteousness. It endures. It lasts forever. Everything that he gives, and remember, he gives us the righteousness of Christ. It endures forever. There's plenty of it. More than we need. So he provides abundantly. Now, beginning at verse 10, we find that it has an effect on us. What he provides, what kind of effect does that have on us? Well, in verse 10, what it does, the first effect is that it brings an increase. Now may he who supplies seed to the sower. Now again, he's borrowing a farming term, but he's talking about money here, talking about resources. Now may he who supplies seed to the sower. In other words, may he, God, who supplies money to the person giving the money and bread for food, supply and, here it is, multiply the seed you have sown, and increase the fruits of your righteousness, while you are enriched in everything for all liberality. Stop there in the middle of verse 11, because that's where it'll break. I'll show you in just a minute. But it's increase. God, as he provides, he does so, and it affects us so that everything about, he's giving to us so that everything's increasing. And then at verse 11, right in the middle, while you are enriched, you're becoming rich in everything. For what reason? For all liberality. Now you hear that word liberality, you're like, I'm no liberal. It's not what he's talking about. Okay? When he says all liberality, he's talking about giving. In other words, he's encouraging us, give liberally, man. Just give freely. Whatever you're giving, decide that you're going to give it and then give it freely. So again, potluck's coming up. What am I going to bring? And then just bring, man, just give it freely. Don't look at it like, oh, man, I wish I would have just kept those cupcakes for myself. Look at these people over here, all they brought was whatever, You just drop it on the table like, boom, here you go, Lord. Have at it. And you just let the people dig in. Give liberally. How do you give liberally? God's giving. How do you give liberally? Hold it loosely. I told you this before, Fusion. The resources that you have, hold them loosely. Don't white knuckle them. Like, oh, I only got a little bit. I got to hold on to it. No, go, hey, you know what? Yeah, it's a little bit compared to everybody else, but I'm going to give it, man, and you just give it freely. Hold it loosely. Hold it loosely. Don't be like that monkey. Like, no, I'm not letting this go. Because you don't want to let those resources go, but in fact, you don't have control of the resources. The resources have control of you. And as long as you're not letting them go, they're not going to let you go. You gotta let that go. Hold it loosely, whatever it is that you have. The time that you have, listen, it's short. It's going to stop at some point. Your heart is going to stop beating. Your lungs are going to stop breathing. It's not yours. Dude, this just, it did. I was looking at the battery. It's like, it's getting kind of low, but I think we'll be fine. I guess we weren't fine. But the time that you have, you don't know how much time you have. Whatever time you have, God has given it to you. So give it away. Now, while you are enriched in everything for all liberality. Ha! Can't faze me. Here we go. It increases, but also it leads to thanksgiving. This is our last. What in the world is that? Thank? Lazy. Thanksgiving. Sorry about that. I'm supposed to say Thanksgiving. Increase in Thanksgiving. What's funny is I go through these slides before I send them, and it's like, yeah, everything looks fine, looks fine. There you go. But in the middle of verse 11, the second part of verse 11, which causes thanksgiving through us to God. Thanksgiving, that's like next week. It causes thanksgiving through us to God. The way that God gives, he provides, causes thanksgiving. Verse 12, for the administration of this service not only supplies the needs of the saints. So giving this money not only supplies the needs of the saints, not only will the Christians in Jerusalem be blessed and have their needs provided, but also is abounding through many thanksgivings to God. So because the Corinthians were giving money, obviously the Jerusalem Christians were very thankful, but everybody else was thankful too. Paul was going to be thankful, like, man, it's exciting to see people giving and being generous. Now he goes on, let's finish up here. Verse 13, while through the proof of this ministry, meaning you're proving your ministry by giving. They glorify God. There it is again. They're giving thanks. They're glorifying God for the obedience of your confession to the gospel of Christ. And for your liberal, see, it is good to be liberal sharing with them and all men. They had given liberally. This was a giving church. And in verses 14 and 15, and by their prayer for you, so they're praying for you, who long for you because of the exceeding grace of God in you, thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. The gift of salvation, the gift of salvation through Jesus. That's how God gave. God gave liberally when he gave Jesus. And thank God that he did, because we wouldn't be saved if he hadn't. Incredible passage on giving.